everybody. Josh here at the Teton Raptor Center in Wilson, Wyoming. I'm with Becky Collier. We're going to be talking about our national bird today, the bald eagle. First off, kind of like what's been going on with the Raptor Center lately?
Teton Raptor Center is continuing to have a busy summer. It's been a very different summer in the presence of COVID-19, but we are finding our way. So research, rehabilitation, and education are all kind of gearing up for the summer months. How about you guys? What's going on with eco tours?
Well, just coming in this morning, we had some red-tailed hawks and osprey flying over, so lots of bird activity, nesting birds all over the Jackson Hole Valley. It's been May and June have been excellent for both black and grizzly bears in Grand Teton National Park. We've been having wonderful sightings. We're seeing our first elk calves of the year, as well as moose calves. I've heard, it sounds like you had a pronghorn sighting the other day, which is
yesterday.
awesome.
I saw a baby pronghorn.
So,
it was awesome.
It's a great time of year for wildlife. So we're going to be talking about bald eagles today, including meeting River, the education bird for the Teton Raptor Center. If you have any questions for us, we'll be answering them in the comment section. So please let us know, and also please share this post if you like it. We'd love to get this information out to more people. First off, let's kind of just do a little background about bald eagles and Jackson Hole.
So bald eagles are, of course, our national symbol. They were named the national symbol of the United States back in the 1782-ish. And within about 100 years of that, bald eagles started facing trouble. They are primarily a fishing eagle, so they're around water. They go after ducks, they go after fish and snakes, but they're also a carrion eater, and that can get them into trouble because they will scavenge on roadkill, they'll scavenge on carcasses, and that includes carcasses across the landscape. So farmers started to perceive them as a threat as expansion happened across the western United States. Fishermen started seeing them as an annoyance. They didn't realize that bald eagles are not going for the super healthy fish down underneath in the bottom of the water. They're going for the half-dead one floating near the top, the easy catch. And they also like to steal. You know, they spend a lot of their day just watching the osprey do the work and then stealing it from them. So bald eagles, as the western expansion happened, as humans really started spreading out across the West, bald eagles started really getting suffering. They were shot, they were killed, they were pushed out of their range, and that really started to affect their numbers. And then as we entered the late 1800s into the 1900s, around, during the World Wars, we started using a chemical called DDT. And that chemical was used to kill mosquitoes in the US. And what we didn't understand is that DDT bioaccumulates in the ecosystem. And that simply means that when you spray the DDT to kill the mosquitoes, it then settles onto the plants and into the ground. It gets absorbed, especially gets washed into our waterways. Plants absorb it, small fish eat the plants, get some DDT, larger fish eat the small fish, and then our eagles ultimately end up with DDT in their system. By 1963 in the United States, we had fewer than 500 pair of bald eagle in the lower 48 states. The DDT did not poison the birds as traditional poison would happen. It caused eggshell thinning. So we started noticing in the 1950s and 60s, where are all the young eagles? All of the eagles had white heads, and a bald eagle does not get its white head until it's mature, which is around 5 years old. So we started thinking, well, where are all the young eagles? What's going on? And by that point, eagles had really been decimated. So encroachment on habitat, being killed. There was a time in the US that bald eagles were considered a nuisance. That combined with DDT just absolutely decimated the bald eagle population. So with the enactment of the Endangered Species Act in the 1960s, with the banning of DDT in the 1970s, and the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act as well, the bald eagles started getting some really good protection. And by 2007, their numbers had rebounded really well. So we went from fewer than 500 pair of bald eagle in the United States to almost 10,000 pair in the lower 48. And today that number has increased even beyond that. We do know there was a recent paper back in 2016 published for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The data suggests that for the most part, eagles have made a nice recovery in the lower 48. This area, however, in the Northern Rockies does show a possible decline of nesting bald eagles since 2007, since they were delisted. And some of that is attributed to lead poisoning, and that can happen when they feed on carcasses and gut piles that have been shot with lead ammunition. That can then poison the birds and cause neurologic issues and sluggishness. They then get hit by cars and have other issues. As a whole, the bald eagle is really a beautiful recovery story. It's a testament to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It's a testament to the Endangered Species Act and the benefits and what it does. How shameful would it have been had we lost our national symbol in the United States? That's the most condensed you can really get our bald eagles. It is a story to tell about bald eagles for sure.
Yeah. So Jackson Hole and Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks are great places to look for bald eagles. Primarily along the major rivers like the Snake River. A few weeks ago I watched a bald eagle. It was in the Snake River, was totally blown out and muddy. I watched a bald eagle dive down and grab what was probably a big kind of type of sucker fish out of the mud.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me to just think about how did it even see that and then land and grab it. Yeah, how do they do that?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So it's kind of a combination of things. First, they have incredibly acute vision, so they have substantially more focus than we do, and they can see more pixels, if you will, than we can. They also have really clear vision at a distance. So eagles in general can sense movement from a mile or greater, which is really incredible. And in the case of bald eagles, they also have polarized lenses. So they have the ability to sort of knock that glare out. Their eyes are built for them to look down into the glare of water.
The other thing I've noticed recently is I was along the South Fork of the Snake, and there's a lot of very large dark eagles on the nests.
Yes.
Tell me about those eagles. They look a lot different than the typical bald eagle that we're used to seeing.
Turns out that bald eagles, as I mentioned, they don't get that white head until they're about 5. And you can actually age a bald eagle between hatch year and ages 5 or 6. Once the white head and the white tail come into play, you really don't know their age beyond, oh, they're at least 5 or 7 years old. You really can't tell, but their first year, that year that they hatch, what we're seeing in the nest right now, those babies might be completely dark. And it's really worth noting that a baby bird is full size when it flies. So they hatch out of the egg, they grow to full height, then they grow their feathers for flying. So they're huge, you know, even as babies, even as fledglings, they're the same size as mom and dad. Turns out that young eagles are actually larger than their mom and dad, and that's because their flight feathers, their primary feathers, and their tail feathers serve as training wheels when they're young. So they're wider and longer than the adult parents. So, a young bald eagle sitting on a branch next to its parent might truly look an additional several inches larger than mom and dad. And River is a great example of that. Our resident bald eagle, she had a wingspan 6 inches larger than it used to be when she was a year old. So her wings over the years, those feathers fall out, and the new feathers that grow in are more streamlined for higher agility. And then in years 2, 3, and 4, they get increasing amounts of mottling on their chest and under their wings, and then their head starts to go white and the body goes dark. I think there are sort of 2 huge misconceptions about bald eagles on the rivers, and one is that so many folks are convinced that they're seeing golden eagles on the river because it's a large, dark brown eagle that appears larger than the bald eagle. And turns out balds and goldens really are essentially the same size and weight, so size really wouldn't come into play. But it's a young bald eagle. Golden eagles are an open plains hunter. They're nesting on cliffs. Could a golden eagle end up in a tree along the river? Never say never, but it's extremely unusual because that's just not really their habitat. Bald eagles are the ones hanging out on the rivers.
Can they swim? Is it dangerous for them if they land in the water? Can they take off from the water?
Yeah, I think that that is one of probably the most commonly asked question about bald eagles that we get is, can they drown if they get wet? And the short answer to that is no. They're very good swimmers. It is, however, different than an osprey. So an osprey can dive 18 or 20 inches into the water, grab a fish that's deep down, and then take off. Osprey are able to do that. Eagles, however, if they land in the water, if they grab a fish and it's really big and it starts to pull them under, they absolutely can let go of the fish if they realize they've made a poor choice. But once they're wet, they do need to swim to shore. They look uncoordinated, they look like they're drowning. There are a lot of videos floating around of people rescuing eagles from the lake or whatever. The eagle cannot fly away once it's wet. It needs to swim to shore, dry off, and then it can take off no sweat. but they're good swimmers. They're very agile swimmers. That's not a problem.
So tell us a little bit more about the scavenging aspect of a bald eagle's diet, because it seems like in the wintertime especially we see a lot of eagles out on the National Elk Refuge. Is that because eagles are moving away from the river and to places that are more visible, or do we have migratory birds coming into the valley in the winter? What is that?
Yeah, so it turns out that our research team has learned a lot about bald eagles over the years. And one of the things we've come to understand through science is that we have resident bald eagles. We have some eagles that do live here year round. We have some eagles that come here in the summer months that leave for the winter, and we have some eagles that come here in the winter that head up closer to Canada for the summertime. So we get a little bit of everything. One thing we've come to understand is that bald eagles actually alter their migration pattern to come through Jackson Hole in the fall. And that's because of the National Elk Refuge and hunting. Yeah. So it has to do with them finding great things to scavenge on in the fall. And then the eagles, again, they hang out a lot on the National Elk Refuge in the winter months because they're looking for an opportunity to scavenge on carcasses and things like that.
So with so many elk being on the National Elk Refuge in winter, there ends up being a lot of carcasses which attract all these eagles. Do you have any cool stories about seeing interactions with eagles and these other scavengers that are also out there?
I think there's one really cool experience that comes to mind is one of our volunteers, Steve Poole, got a really awesome experience a couple winters ago. There was a mule deer carcass on the back side of the refuge, and he stopped and was photographing some ravens and some magpies fighting over it. And then a coyote came in and started trying to run off the magpies and the ravens. Then a bald eagle and its young came in. So there was an adult bald eagle and a young bald eagle. It's a really cool example of hierarchy among the food chain. I've seen bald eagles with fish before on the ice on rivers, and I've seen magpies tag teaming, where one magpie will go and pull the bald eagle's tail feathers, and then when the bald eagle goes to stop him, the other magpie swoops in and grabs a bite of the fish and then shares it.
Yeah, but when you see these carcasses and the number of animals that go on, it's a really good indication of there not being any waste in nature, that when an animal dies in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, it's feeding a lot of animals.
That's right.
And so from a hunting perspective, it's one of the reasons that it's really important to consider using non-toxic ammunition and avoiding lead ammunition when possible. So we've got River, the bald eagle education bird for the Teton Raptor Center, with us. Let's learn a little bit about River. One thing I'm noticing is she's got the white head. It's still got some like gray streaking in there. So what does that tell us about how old River is?
Yeah, so River is our resident bald eagle. She's been with Teton Raptor Center since 2015. And again, because of that plumage change, we know that River hatched in 2013. So we know that she's 7 years old this year. That does take time. You know, I've worked with eagles that were over 10 years old and still had a little bit of that streaking. So she's right on track, I would say. When River joined Teton Raptor Center back in 2014, completely dark beak, mottled all over. In River's story is a little bit unusual. She was picked up at about a year old. She was picked up along the Missouri River. She was floating on a piece of ice down the river, and some folks were concerned. She was trying to fly, couldn't. So a game warden picked her up. Turned out that she had contracted a pretty serious bacterial infection. A little bit unusual. It's a bacteria that blooms in the presence of pollution. And unfortunately, it damaged the bone in this wing. She's over the infection, so that's gone. But unfortunately, the damage is permanent. So River lives with us because she's not fully flighted. She can't control the end of that wing, and she's not able to get much altitude, get much lift when she takes off. So that's why River's been with us since 2015.
Great. So we'll show some of the video of River getting some exercise and enrichment.
Yes.
It's one of the things that's really important at the Raptor Center, is give these birds something to do and enjoy their time outside.
I think that's important to note, that all the birds at Teton Raptor Center, you know, River is the heaviest bird we have. Again, 4.75 kilos today, so super heavy. She's the largest bird we have. She's female. It's worth noting that the females, I don't even think we've said this yet, but the females are about 1/3 larger than the males. All of the birds at Teton Raptor Center, we try to provide them enrichment and exercise to their abilities. So in River's case, we do try to get her out here to get some sunshine, get some fresh air.
So how old could River live?
Yeah.
And how old could a wild eagle live?
So we do know that captive eagles live a lot longer than wild eagles, or are capable of living a lot longer than wild eagles. And that's simply because they're not having to work as hard, right? We do take care of them, you know, as best as we can in captivity. In the wild, as soon as they're weak or sick, they're done for, right? That's the thing about being a predator. So in the wild, we do know 2 of the oldest bald eagles ever identified west of the Mississippi River were from right here in Jackson Hole. You know, 20 to 25 years old is an exceptional life for a bird in the wild, for an eagle in the wild. And
so Becky, what can people do to contribute to the conservation of our large raptors and help out with the mission of the Teton Raptor Center?
So many things, so many things. I think the most direct and immediate thing for someone that lives locally to do is to bring us fish. River loves having fresh fish, access to fresh fish. We also need fish for our osprey patients and our eagle patients. So having that fresh fish is really helpful if you live around here. Another thing folks can do is they can contribute to Teton Raptor Center, whether that's financially supporting our work, it could be through volunteerism, it could be through just telling people about the work that we do.
And so how can we find the Raptor Center online?
Yeah, so TetonRaptorCenter.org, and then we're also Teton Raptor Center on Facebook, and we're on Instagram.
And you can learn more about Jackson Hole Ecotour Adventures online as well, ghecotouradventures.com, and also Jackson Hole Ecotours on Instagram and Facebook. We are doing wildlife tours of Grand Teton and Yellowstone every day, all summer long. We'd love to see some folks. So with that, I want to end with a joke.
Oh,
so,
no.
Becky.
Yes.
What is the only bird that doesn't have to go to the barber?
The only bird that doesn't have to go to the barber. I don't know.
Bald eagle. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Have a great day.